Advance with Vance. That's the focus of tonight's angle. Last summer, Dem and media types spent a lot of time trash-talking Trump's VP pick.
Could Kamala Harris have picked a better contrast to JD Vance, who I think in opposite to Waltz, to know that guy is to really detest that guy.
You may have noticed Donald Trump has been resorting to some wild lies about my record, and some of what he and his running mate are saying, well, it's just plain weird.
Tim Walz over there, who was the first one to actually call JD Vance and Donald Trump weird, and then look at the rest of them. MAGA, Make America Great Again. How about the Republican Party? And then there's, of course, JD Vance. Of course, people might just be searching for the word weird and associating with Republicans.
They're in a Vance trance, yeah. And now we know why they were so hot last summer to smash him. And it wasn't Vance's childish cat lady comments, which were hilarious, by the way. Instead, it was because they knew how effective he'd be. Because like Trump, the man never stops. He never backs down from a fight. Last week, he laid waste to the Euro globalists who think U.S. taxpayers should be their forever bankers.
I've heard a lot about what you need to defend yourselves from, and of course that's important. But what has seemed a little bit less clear to me, and certainly I think to many of the citizens of Europe, is what exactly it is that you're defending yourselves for.
It was a seismic message felt around the world and a much-needed wake-up call for our allies. Now, one of the best things about Vance is how he schools these impudent news anchors who usually take the side of foreigners over Americans.
In fact, we know that there are cases of people who allegedly were properly vetted and then were literally planning terrorist attacks on our country. That happened during the campaign, if you may remember. So clearly not all of these foreign nationals have been properly vetted.
But there are 30,000 people in the pipeline, Afghan refugees.
But my primary concern as the vice president, Margaret, is to look after the American people. And now that we know that we...
Masterful on policy? Yeah, of course he is. But Vance's cultural message is just as important.
My message to young men is, I think that our culture sends a message to young men that you should suppress every masculine urge. You should try to cast aside your family. You should try to suppress what makes you a young man in the first place. And I think that my message to young men is don't allow this broken culture to send you a message that you're a bad person because you're a man, because you like to tell a joke, because you like to have a beer with your friends, or because you're competitive.
Also very important in a vice president, of course, is he never forgets who's in the driver's seat.
He's got the best sense of humor of any American political figure, but I think this is why young men in particular are so, they're so inspired by President Trump, is because he doesn't allow the media to tell him he can't make a joke or he can't have an original thought. President Trump just says what's on his mind. That's a damn good thing, and it's a good example to set for young men in American culture.
And he's right, of course. He's right. Young men love Trump. Men ages 18 to 29 voted for Trump by a 14-point margin. The Washington Post notes that it's the first time a GOP presidential candidate claimed an outright majority of the group since 1988. But why did Republicans in the past struggle with this group? Well, first of all, we all know big media, sometimes at the urging of government officials, always stepped in to help the Democrats.
The Biden administration did more to destroy free speech, not just in the United States, but also in Europe, than any administration in American history.
Again, he's relentless. He's always on the offensive. He's reminding Americans about why cutting wasteful spending is critical for our economic survival.
The third thing that he's tried to do, of course, with the help of Elon and all the great folks at DOGE, is ask, what are we doing with all of the American taxpayers' money, and why are we wasting so much of it on garbage that the American people either aren't aware that we're spending it on or don't want to be spending it on?
100% right. It's very effective. Now, when you watch these clips, you watch the entire speech, which you should, you understand why Trump picked him in the first place. Again, it's the genius of Donald Trump. And he was excoriated for picking Vance, as you recall. And so far, the MAGA base, they couldn't be happier. And they're so happy that Vance is already shaping up to be the runaway choice of the MAGA supporters to be Trump's successor. The New York Times today is reporting on the, quote, quieter efforts that are underway to position Vice President Vance as Mr. Trump's eventual successor, and also revealing that Vance is expected to lead some of the legislative battles over Mr. Trump's agenda. The administration's chief lobbyist in the Senate, and he's also assigned to help oversee the potential sale of TikTok. Well, one thing's clear. They're definitely not treating him like Biden's people treated Kamala in the first few years as an afterthought. She couldn't get arrested. No, where's Kamala? His brain power is just beyond dispute. And the caliber of people surrounding Trump in general is just superb. But in promoting JD Vance and other populists, from the millennial generation, showcasing them, being confident enough to do that, President Trump is not making the mistake of Reagan, who, remember, did not leave the party in the greatest of hands. Trump is deciding, at least for now, that he's going to leave this MAGA coalition in great hands, one that's going to be around for decades to come. And that's the angle.
Elon's nerd army's having fun, maybe a little too much fun.
I said, what trait do they really have? And the trait that they really have was that they're extraordinary with computers. They can take them. He said they make love to their computer. I said, I don't want to hear about that. Doesn't sound too good.
I don't care what Big Balls does to his computer. Whatever he's doing is working. AOC, on the other hand, not satisfied. She wants to know who Big Balls thinks he is.
Every day, our job is to wake up and say, what can I do today? Yeah. There is no act too small. That does not matter. Every single action matters. And so when they try to come in, make them show a warrant. Make them show a document. Make them assert their authority. Ask them, who are you? Who are you? Because at the end of the day, they're no one. And he's running around because he thinks he's got a bank account with a lot of zeros in it, that it makes him some kind of super citizen. I don't think so.
Who do you trust with your money? A guy with a bank account full of zeros, or a lady who rents an apartment with her fiancé and earmarks $500,000 for an anti-racist oyster reef in Queens? Don't eat oysters off the coast of Queens. It's just common sense. Like, why have we spent $16 billion for California's high-speed rail, and there's still no rail? They're over a decade behind schedule, and they keep asking for more money. So this California Republican said enough is enough, and liberals' response was rational. They hit her with a tomato.
Activists at LA's Union Station chant, "Build that rail."
Democracy is almost dead.
One dressed as a dinosaur. Another appears to throw a tomato at a Republican assembly member.
Who's going to pick our tomatoes, we heard, when Trump shut down the border. Apparently, anti-Dogers dressed as dinosaurs are. Secretary of Transportation Sean Duffy showed up with a message for him. Listen.
I want to address the protesters for a moment, if I could. I think they were chanting, "Build the rail." It's been 17 years and $16 billion, and no rail has been built. So if you want to go protest somewhere, if you want to shout at someone, go to the governor's mansion. Go talk to Democrats in the legislature who have brought us this crappy project. We're done with it. And you know what? You're going to have people who love fraud, who love waste, who love trains to nowhere. This is a boondoggle. They should ask the question, who didn't build my rail? Who got rich? What consultants, what politicians' husbands got rich off of this money?
California handed a bunch of politically collected contractors $16 billion almost 20 years ago, and there's no train. But Biden just kept sending checks with no questions asked. He's a train guy. But you can't just keep pumping money into a boondoggle. You got to pull the plug. And that's what Duffy did. California's on their own. Trump's forcing the left to be pro-fraud, waste, and abuse and boondoggle. Listen to the media.
Americans voted for you on the immigration and the economy, but these voters say they're angry and frustrated by these firings. They don't like the work of Elon Musk and these other actions. What do you say to them?
Who do you work for?
I work for ABC News, sir.
Who?
ABC News.
No wonder. let me just tell you that I have today the highest poll numbers I've ever had. They like the job that we're doing. They like the job that Elon's doing. He's doing something that a lot of people wouldn't have the courage to do. We want to streamline our country. We want to streamline, because you know why? Because we want our country to survive and thrive. And we're finding billions and billions of dollars of waste, fraud, and abuse. Billions, and I mean numbers like you wouldn't believe. And we haven't even started yet.
For so many years, Republicans have been scared to cut spending and fire bureaucrats because of the blowback. Trump's been shot, and if he lost the last election, he'd be in jail. He's not worried about political blowback. He's doing it because it's the right thing to do. He's invincible to the hurricane of negativity from the legacy press. This should be the playbook going forward, and Republicans don't have to get shot to do it. You campaign on something, you win, and you do it. That's what Thomas Jefferson had in mind. And if the press doesn't like it, sorry, guys, elections have consequences.
I love how the media takes a few critics when the overwhelming response from the American people is support for what this administration is doing. I think all Americans would agree that funding mastectomies in Mozambique is not something that the American people should be funding, or DEI programs. I think it's fraudulent that the American government has been ripping off taxpayers in this way. Why is the media so against cutting waste, fraud, and abuse from the government? I don't get it.
I just want to ask a question.
We won't be deterred. We will not be deterred from people like you and the press who are clearly adamantly opposed to cutting waste, fraud, and abuse.
We shut down the entire country for 2 years, 3. And the Democrats loved it. They wanted to keep it shut down longer. No one worked. The schools closed. Whole government agencies stopped functioning. And now we're shutting down, what, less than 1% of the government, only the government, not the U.S. economy. And Democrats are calling it a civil war. Entire agencies for the whole pandemic, they weren't issuing any new regulations. They weren't approving new permits. The Durham investigation just stopped for a year. No one was even going to federal court. The only people who worked in the government were essential employees. Everybody else stayed home. 90% of the government wasn't essential. Now, all of a sudden, everyone's essential? Everyone? How'd that happen? They're still not going into the office.
Hi, everyone. Kelly Loeffler. It's my second day here at the SBA. I could not be more excited to be here, so I thought I'd take a walk. And what I found is that exactly what's been said is true. About 90% of our employees are working from home. Well, that ends Monday with President Trump's order to return to work.
Trump has a mandate to modernize American government. And in the course of that process, we're finding a sickening level of corruption and kickbacks. American voters didn't vote for pork. The politicians took our money, and that's what they turned it into.
President Trump came to town, a new way of thinking. They're shuttering agencies. They're shutting people down. They're finding things like $2 million spent in Guatemala for sex changes, $3 million spent in Brazil for a girl-centric climate change, $4.8 million spent in Ukraine for social media influencers. While you're at it, but the people who vote for this, I've voted against all of this, but the members of the Senate who voted for this spent several $100,000 sending designers in Ukraine to the fashion show in Paris. It goes on and on.
Why are we handing Ukrainians $5 million to make TikToks? Is that what, for war propaganda? Because you can do it for a lot less than $5 million. Kamala doesn't even pay influencers that much money. We're sending Ukrainian designers to Paris Fashion Week. Is that like a sex trafficking operation? Because it sounds pretty Jeffrey Epstein-y. Overnight, Elon's team doged 95 bad contracts, saving you $115 million. But Democrats say, fraud, it's not a big deal.
There is a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse in the federal government, though.
I'm not going to say that there's a lot. I'm going to say that it does exist.
I'm going to say that exists. I don't think that there's a lot.
No? Crockett should ask folks on the street about spending $20 million for Iraqi Sesame Street. We did.
He found that we're spending $20 million on Sesame Street in Iraq.
Sesame Street in Iraq? Where's Sesame Street supposed to? I think all the kids know they 1, 2, 3s and ABCs.
What?
And that's nuts.
$20 million for Elmo? Hell no. Do you want to spend your tax-paying dollars on Sesame Street in Iraq?
Sesame Street in Iraq?
The way this works is we vote for politicians and politicians vote to spend money. The politicians will say, yeah, we'll give $40 billion to foreign aid. But they're not itemizing everything like, oh yeah, I want $16 million for a climate change institute for transsexuals in Transylvania. No, some unelected bureaucrat is deciding that. And if your house just burnt down in Pacific Palisades and you hear we're throwing money out the window like this, you're going to have a heart attack. DOGE is just doing what families all do, tightening their belts when the credit card's maxed out. These layoffs aren't personal. They're not even really political. It's basic arithmetic. We're sorry if some federal employees might lose their job. We are. But they work for us. And clearly, $36 trillion later, it's not working. One DOGE government scientist complained, saying, they're presenting us as trophies. No, that's what Soros Jr. does with politicians he owns. A bought and sold politician. Now that's a trophy. Look at that. No one's holding you up to the cameras like a big mouth bass. Everyone got offered buyouts. Everyone from the government's been working from home for 4 years. It's time to move on like the rest of the country did a long time ago. Next up, the post office.
We want to have a post office that works well and doesn't lose massive amounts of money. And we're thinking about doing that, and it'll be a form of a merger, but it'll remain the Postal Service, and I think it'll operate a lot better than it has been over the years.
Commerce is going to swallow up the post office, just like state swallowed up USAID. All of these agencies freelancing are out of control. It's costing us billions. We're operating like foreign countries within our own government. Trump's licking his chops over Fort Knox.
All my life I've heard about Fort Knox. That's where the gold is kept, right? I heard Fort Knox, oh. But you know, we're getting a little bit shaky. We're getting the yips on this stuff. Like, I want to find out. So we're going to open up the doors. I'm going to see if we have gold there. We want to find out, did anybody steal the gold in Fort Knox? It's a pretty amazing place, but I'm going to actually go. We're going to open the doors. We're going to inspect Fort Knox. We want to make sure that we actually have, 400 tons of gold or whatever the hell it is. It's a lot of gold. I don't want to open it and the cupboards are bare.
There better be gold in that vault, or else there's no golden age. My wife used to work in the gold business, and they used to do annual vault checks in person to verify the physical gold was in the vault. It's basic due diligence. But somehow Fort Knox goes years without a spot check. All of these directives that Trump's putting in place can be wiped out by the next president. So Congress is going to set it into concrete.
The president is over 300 executive actions already, and we're going to codify so much of what he's doing so that the next team can't unwind it.
Republicans control Washington, so now it's time to get serious. So when the Republicans lay out this year's budget, everything DOGE is doing is going to be worthless if they don't get it together.
If we were fiscally conservative, why wouldn't we take the savings from Elon Musk and DOGE and move it over here and help with the border? Why would we be doing a brand new bill to increase spending by $340 billion?
Republicans have a golden opportunity to use Chainsaw Musk. We've been given a gift. Musk even gave himself a deadline, a year and a half. And then he's going to go back to colonizing Mars. Trump's not running again, so there shouldn't be any fear. So let these young men make love to their computers for the good of the country.